They told you it's complicated. They said you need 10 steps, 5 books, 3 rituals, and a coach to unlock your potential. They wrapped it in formulas and frameworks and fancy words. But here's the truth, the real truth. Quantum manifestation is simple, so simple that the mind rejects it. It's too easy, too direct, too still, and that's why most people miss it. Because the ego thrives in struggle, it wants to earn it, prove it, fight for it. It wants a mountain to climb and a battle to win. Because if it's simple, then the mind isn't in charge, and that's terrifying to the mind but empowering to the soul. Because the soul knows the secret. The soul remembers that reality is a mirror, that the field is always listening, and that the only thing you ever needed to do was tune your frequency. Not your thoughts, not your hustle, not your image, your frequency. And that's where most get lost. They try to manifest with logic, with willpower, with endless action. But quantum manifestation doesn't care about how hard you try. It responds to who you are being, to the signal you are emitting every second. And your signal isn't your vision board, it's your vibration, your dominant emotional state, your baseline beliefs, your relationship with the now. Because that's what the field reads, that's what life mirrors. And if your frequency says I'm not enough, I don't trust life, I have to control, then no matter how pretty your affirmations are, the field echoes your truth, not your script. And the truth is, energy doesn't lie. You can't trick the quantum field, you can't bypass it with fake positivity or forced smiles. It responds to coherence, to authenticity, to resonance. And the more you try to manifest from a place of lack, the more you amplify lack. Because the signal is louder than the strategy, and the field responds to vibration, not vocabulary. And that's why people say it doesn't work. They tried the steps, they made the lists, they did the visualizations, but nothing changed. Because they never became the version of themselves who lives the life they wanted. They kept being the old self, chasing a new outcome. But quantum manifestation doesn't reward chase, it responds to embodiment. And embodiment is presence, it's alignment, it's becoming, not someday but now. And now is where the power is, not tomorrow, not next month, not after the breakthrough, now. Because now is the only place the field hears you from, now is the only place where frequency lives. And your frequency is not a secret, it's in your breath, your choices, your reactions, your thoughts when no one's watching. And when you stop trying to perform and start learning to feel, to regulate, to align, that's when everything starts to move. Because you're no longer sending mixed signals, you're no longer pretending, you're attuning, you're calibrating, you're becoming. And the field has no choice but to respond. Because the field is neutral, it doesn't judge, it reflects. It's a mirror, not a scorekeeper. And mirrors don't care what you say, they show you what you are. And when what you are shifts, what you see shifts. And that's where the real magic is. Not in doing more, but in being clearer, being truer, being resonant. Because when you are coherent with your desires, they arrive. Not because you hunted them down, but because you matched their home frequency. And home is not out there, it's you, your body, your energy, your presence. That's where manifestation begins and ends. And the simpler it is, the harder it is to believe. Because we've been trained to chase, to strive, to complicate. But quantum manifestation is the opposite. It's not about control, it's about alignment. It's not about effort, it's about permission. And that permission is something only you can give. Only you can decide to drop the mask, to release the noise, to tune inward and ask, what am I really broadcasting, what am I really expecting, what am I actually available for? Because the field is always listening, not to your words, but to your energy. And your energy never lies. So if you're not living the life you dream about, it's not because you're cursed, it's not because you're broken, it's because there's a mismatch between your vision and your vibration. And that's not bad news, that's liberation. Because it means you don't have to fight anymore, you just have to feel, you just have to listen, you just have to get radically honest about what's really going on inside of you. And that's the part people resist, because it's easier to keep chasing than to stop and sit with yourself. It's easier to read another book than to sit in silence and ask, what frequency am I living from right now? Not what I want, not what I say, not what I plan, but what I live from. And when you do that, when you slow down enough to become aware of your field, you realize that you've been manifesting all along, every day, every hour, every breath. Because manifestation isn't something you turn on when you want something, it's something you're doing constantly through your being. And the moment you really get that, everything changes. You stop trying to manipulate the field and you start tending to your signal. You stop asking how do I get what I want, and start asking how do I become the version of me who already has it. And that version is not somewhere far away, that version is a frequency, a pattern, a level of embodiment that you can step into right now. But only if you're willing to let go of your attachment to the old one. Because the field can't give you what you won't receive. And you can't receive from a state of resistance. You can't receive from a place of fear or unworthiness or performance. You can only receive from presence, from trust, from allowing. And that's why simplicity is so radical. It strips away the layers, it removes the distractions, it brings you back to the core of creation, which is always inside of you. And that's the great cosmic joke: the thing you're chasing is already coded into your energy. But you can't activate it from scarcity, you can't reach it through striving, you unlock it through resonance. And resonance is a practice. It's not a one-time high, it's not a lucky meditation, it's a way of living, of breathing, of being. It's your daily choice to come back to the signal of your soul and choose coherence over chaos, alignment over performance, presence over pressure. And that's what makes you magnetic. Not your looks, not your credentials, not your plans, your energy. And when that energy stabilizes, the field organizes. Because energy is the blueprint, it's the instruction the quantum realm follows. And when your instruction is clear, so is your reality. So the real question is not what do you want, it's who are you willing to become, and what frequency are you willing to commit to. Not in theory, not in fantasy, but in this moment, in your body, in your choices. Because that's where manifestation lives. Not in some distant timeline, but in the version of you who stops waiting and starts being, right now. And from that being flows doing. But not forced, not frantic, inspired, aligned doing that feels like ease. Because it comes from essence, not effort. And this is what so many miss. They try to do their way into being, but the quantum works the opposite way. You become, and then the doing flows. Because it's not what you do, it's where you do it from. And when you do it from truth, from alignment, from trust, the field amplifies, it echoes, it builds it into form. And what was once a dream becomes the most natural thing. Because you're no longer trying to create it, you're living as it. And that shift is everything. And once you start living as it, you begin to understand why most people never get it. It's not because they're not smart or spiritual or worthy, it's because they're addicted to complexity. They think the answer must be hidden, buried, coded in a secret formula they haven't cracked yet. Because if it were simple, then why haven't they figured it out? But the truth is they just don't trust what's simple, they don't trust what feels too easy. Because they've been conditioned to believe that value comes from struggle, that truth must be earned, that worth must be proven. So when the quantum whispers, be still, be honest, be present, they can't hear it. Because they're tuned to noise, they're tuned to force, they're tuned to everything but now. And now is the portal, always not yesterday, not tomorrow, now. And that's the paradox, the thing they're chasing is only accessible when they stop chasing it. The door only opens when they stop pushing it. And that's where the bravery comes in, not to fight, but to surrender, not to figure out, but to feel. To let go of the mental gymnastics and return to the body, return to the breath, return to the truth. And the truth is, you are already connected, you are already plugged in, you are already enough. The frequency is not far, it is here, pulsing in your cells, vibrating in your field, waiting to be chosen. Not once, but again and again until it becomes your new default. Because that's how reality bends. Not through obsession, but through consistency. Not through pressure, but through permission. The permission to trust what you know, even when the world tells you it's not enough. The permission to stay in resonance, even when nothing outside has changed yet. And that space between the shift in energy and the shift in matter, that's where most give up. They say it's not working, they say nothing's happening. But something is happening always. Because the field responds instantly, not always with form, but always with reflection. So the question is, are you looking or are you doubting? Are you tuning or are you testing? Because the moment you shift into testing, you exit the frequency, and the field mirrors your exit. It gives you more to test, more to doubt, more to wait for. And the waiting becomes endless, unless you decide to be done with the waiting, done with the hoping, done with the reaching. And instead choose to embody, choose to live, choose to align, again and again. Not perfectly, but honestly, not forcefully, but fully. And the more you live there, the more normal it becomes. And when it becomes normal, it becomes reality. Not because you made it happen, but because you made it welcome. And welcome is the key, that's the signal the field reads. Not how hard you try, but how open you are, how surrendered, how receptive, how available. And availability is not a mood, it's a devotion, it's a decision, it's a sacred yes to yourself. A yes to the life that is already coded into your frequency. And the moment you say that yes, the real work begins. Not to chase, but to integrate. Not to prove, but to stabilize. Not to grasp, but to anchor. Because the field is already giving, it's always giving, it's just waiting for you to become the one who can receive. And receiving is an art, it's not about passivity, it's about presence, it's about being so attuned to your inner world that when the external shows up, you're not surprised, you're not overwhelmed, you're not unprepared, you're ready. Because you've already lived it energetically and now it's just catching up in form. And that is the simplicity nobody gets because they're waiting to believe instead of choosing to become. They want to see it before they be it. But that's not how frequency works. Frequency is not a mirror, it's a magnet. It doesn't reflect what you want, it attracts what you are. And what you are is defined not by your thoughts alone, but by your embodiment, your nervous system, your rituals, your self-concept. And that's why quantum manifestation is not wishful thinking, it's identity work, it's energetic discipline, it's a daily return to the version of you who already has it. And that version may not be louder, but they are clearer, more grounded, more aligned, and they don't need to convince themselves because they know. And knowing isn't thinking, it's feeling, it's remembering, it's trusting what you can't yet prove but deeply sense. And that trust creates the bridge from vision to reality, it creates the coherence between soul and form, and that coherence becomes magnetic. And the magnetic field you generate is not random, it's precise, it's intelligent, it's constantly communicating with the field of infinite possibilities. And the more stable your frequency, the more precise the field's response, the more refined your embodiment, the more direct the reflection. And that's what most people miss. They keep changing their signal, they keep tuning in and out, they meditate and then spiral, they visualize and then complain, they align and then test. And every time they test, they reset the signal and confuse the field. So the field waits, it doesn't deny, it waits, it listens, and when it receives a clear signal, it responds. But clarity requires constancy, not perfection, but return again and again. Especially when nothing is happening, especially when the old reality is still echoing, especially when fear tries to grab the mic. Because those are the thresholds, the sacred portals where you decide who you really are. Are you the one who doubts or the one who chooses? Are you the one who reacts or the one who creates? And that decision, made in the invisible, is what shapes the visible. That is quantum simplicity, choosing frequency over fear, choosing coherence over chaos, choosing presence over pressure. And the more you choose it, the more the field responds. Not because you proved your worth, but because you aligned with your truth. And your truth is not something to be earned, it's something to be remembered, it's something to be felt, it's something to be embodied, not someday but now and now and now. Because now is always the portal, and the moment you fully live that, you realize you were never waiting for the quantum was waiting for you. And when you arrive in that realization, something shifts, not outside but within. Because you're no longer chasing, you're channeling, you're no longer wishing, you're witnessing, you're no longer hoping, you're holding the truth. And the truth is, you were always the key, you were always the portal, you were always the activator of the frequency you desired. But your mind was too busy looking for steps, while your soul was simply waiting for stillness. And in stillness, you remember the codes, the clarity, the calm that calls in everything with no effort, no push, no grasping, just resonance. And when you become that resonance, reality catches up, not because you demanded it, but because you became it. And that is why it looks like magic to those who don't understand, but it's not magic, it's mathematics, it's energy, it's alignment. And the field is never confused, it's never slow, it's never cruel, it's exact, it's immediate, and it's mirroring you with absolute fidelity every second. So if you want to know what you're emitting, look at what you're receiving, not from judgment, but from information. And if you don't like the reflection, don't fight the mirror, shift the frequency, tune the signal, recalibrate the self-concept. And do it not once, but daily, not until it works, but until it becomes who you are. And this is the part most skip because it's boring, it's subtle, it's not dramatic enough. And so they think it's not working. But simplicity isn't sexy, it's sacred, it's powerful, it's the invisible architecture behind every quantum leap. And those leaps only happen when your identity becomes the container, strong enough, wide enough, soft enough to hold the new reality without collapse. And holding doesn't mean gripping, it means integrating, breathing into the expansion, anchoring the new level, and relaxing into the truth that it was never about getting, it was about receiving. And receiving was never about luck, it was always about alignment. And alignment is not an accident, it's a decision, it's a devotion. And when that devotion becomes your default, your reality doesn't just shift, it transforms, it transcends the limits of time, of logic, of probability, and enters the realm of inevitability. Where what you once dreamed is now what you wake up to, not because you forced it, but because you finally stopped blocking it. And letting go of resistance is the fastest way to return to your natural state of receiving. Because abundance is not created, it's revealed. And the more you relax into that, the faster life responds, not because you're doing more, but because you're being more of your true self, more of your natural frequency, more of your soul, and less of the noise. And in that space, everything changes quietly, consistently, completely. Because the quantum field doesn't need your drama, it needs your clarity. It doesn't respond to your struggle, it responds to your signal. It doesn't care how hard you try, it reflects how true you are. And truth doesn't scream, it hums, it resonates, it lands with a silence so deep, it moves reality itself. And most people miss it because they're addicted to the noise, to the search, to the effort, to the story that says, if it's not hard, it's not real. And that story keeps them cycling through loops of almost receiving, almost shifting, almost breaking through, but never quite locking in. And the only thing keeping them out is the belief that it has to be more complicated. And the moment that belief dissolves, everything opens. Because you're no longer trying to deserve what's already yours, you're no longer trying to earn what you already are. And the illusion of separation collapses. And in that collapse, your wholeness rushes in and fills every part of your being, until there's no more lack, no more waiting, no more needing, just presence, just flow, just a deep, steady yes from the universe. And that yes was always there, it just needed your yes to meet it. And now that it has, things begin to unfold differently, not faster but smoother, not louder but clearer. And every step begins to feel like alignment, not achievement, like remembering, not conquering. And your nervous system begins to relax, your breath deepens, your decisions sharpen, and your life starts moving with you, not against you. And this is the natural state, this is the default setting of your being, before the programming, before the pressure, before the performance. And now you're returning to it, not by effort but by essence, not by doing more but by becoming less distracted, less split, less distorted, and more real. And from that realness you create, not because you're trying to prove something but because you're overflowing. And that overflow is what magnetizes miracles, it's what shifts timelines, it's what makes you unstoppable, not because you're forceful but because you're in harmony. And harmony is the most powerful force in the universe because it cannot be denied, it cannot be faked, it cannot be manipulated, it just is. And when you become that is, life bends around you because it recognizes itself in you and responds accordingly. You stop chasing outcomes because outcomes begin chasing you. You stop begging for clarity because clarity becomes your baseline. You stop pushing for results because results become inevitable, not because you're entitled but because you're embodied. And embodiment is the highest signal you can send to the field. It says, I'm no longer wishing, I'm no longer waiting, I'm no longer rehearsing, I am it now. And the quantum responds instantly, not always visibly but always precisely, with the next aligned step, with the next moment of truth, with the next layer of power. And the more you walk that path, the more obvious it becomes that you never needed to become someone else, you only needed to come home to yourself. And home is not a destination, it's a state of coherence. It's where your inner world and outer world reflect each other, without distortion, without delay, without resistance. And this is the magic nobody talks about, not because it's hidden, but because it's too simple, too immediate, too available to make sense to the mind that wants to earn it, that wants to solve it, that wants to build an empire on top of it. But truth doesn't need to be sold, it only needs to be remembered. And when you remember, you become unshakable, not because life gets easier, but because you stop arguing with what is. You stop leaking energy into doubt, into fear, into projection, and you bring all of that power back into presence, into creation, into devotion. And that devotion becomes your magnetism, your calm becomes your clarity becomes your currency, and your life becomes an unfolding expression of that frequency. And that unfolding is the manifestation, not the car, not the house, not the partner, those are just reflections. The true manifestation is the you who is living in resonance with their truth, without needing a reason, without needing a reward, just because it feels like home. And that kind of authenticity is rare, not because it's hard, but because it requires letting go of everything that is not. And that's the real work, the work of releasing the layers that dimmed your light, the stories that stole your voice, the beliefs that twisted your worth, and coming back to the simplicity of I am, and letting that be enough, letting that be the foundation, letting that be the portal. Because it is, it always was, and now you know. And now that you know, you cannot unknow it, you cannot return to the illusion of lack and separation and delay. Because something in you has clicked, something in you has landed, something in you remembers. And that remembrance is not just personal, it's collective. Because every time one of us comes home, we make it easier for others to find the way. Every time one of us dissolves the illusion of struggle, we weaken the grid of fear that holds humanity hostage. And that's why your manifestation matters, not just for you but for the world, not just for your bank account but for our future, not just for comfort but for consciousness. Because when you remember your power, you become a lighthouse, a map, a portal for others to walk through. And that ripple cannot be measured, that shift cannot be faked because the frequency never lies. And people feel you, they feel when you've dropped the mask, they feel when you've claimed your energy, they feel when you're living from soul. And they don't need an explanation, they don't need a course, they don't need a script, they just feel it and something in them remembers too. And that's how the quantum works, not through logic but through resonance, not through persuasion but through transmission, not through proof but through embodiment. And when you become that embodiment, your life stops being a chase and starts being a current, a stream of synchronicities, a wave of alignment that keeps expanding. Not because you're doing more, but because you're doing less, with more presence, less noise, more signal, less hustle, more truth. And truth doesn't scream, it hums, it vibrates, it radiates. And everything that matches that vibration finds you, with ease, with elegance, with timing so perfect it feels like destiny. But it's not destiny, it's design, it's the echo of your energy, it's the mirror of your coherence, it's the reward of your resonance. And when you live from that place, you don't ask for signs because life becomes the sign, you don't search for confirmation because your being is the confirmation, you don't fear the unknown because you've made peace with mystery. And that peace becomes your power, not the loud explosive kind, but the grounded unwavering kind, the kind that moves mountains without trying, the kind that bends timelines without effort, the kind that changes everything by simply being. And that is the ultimate expression of quantum manifestation, to know that you never had to fight for your life to begin, to know that the moment you aligned your frequency, life aligned with you, to know that the key was never force, it was always frequency. And the more you live in that knowing, the simpler everything becomes, not easier but simpler. Because simplicity is the language of truth, and quantum manifestation is the ultimate simplicity. You vibrate, you attract, you embody, you receive. But the mind will tell you it's too easy, that you must complicate it, strategize it, intellectualize it. Because the mind fears surrender, the ego fears being unnecessary, but the soul knows. The soul doesn't need to know how, it just knows, it is. And when you let the soul lead, when you tune your body, your breath, your attention to that knowing, everything else aligns. Your money, your relationships, your opportunities, your creativity, they stop being things you chase and start being extensions of who you are. Because manifestation is not about getting, it's about expressing, it's about becoming, it's about holding the energy of your desire so fully that life has no choice but to match it. And if it hasn't matched yet, it doesn't mean it won't, it just means you're still aligning, you're still shedding, you're still returning. And that return is sacred, that return is everything. Because the truth is, you never left, you just forgot, and now you remember. And remembering is the real magic, not in theory but in embodiment, in the way you walk into a room, in the way you speak to yourself, in the way you hold your energy when no one is watching. Because that's the signal, that's the broadcast, that's the frequency. And the quantum field is always listening, not to your words but to your essence, not to your goals but to your presence, not to your vision board but to your vibration. And when your vibration is clear, clean, coherent, your life mirrors that with clarity, with elegance, with speed. And that speed is not rushed, it's divine, it's precise, it's perfect. And the more you let go of needing to control it, the more beauty unfolds. Because quantum manifestation is not about controlling reality, it's about co-creating with it, it's about dancing with possibility instead of demanding guarantees, it's about becoming so resonant, so true, so that reality bends, not because you forced it, but because you aligned with it. And when that becomes your way of being, simplicity becomes your superpower, stillness becomes your strength, presence becomes your magnetism, and manifestation becomes a natural result of your frequency. Not a goal, but a reflection, not a chase, but a consequence. And in that space, you no longer need to prove, you no longer need to explain, you no longer need to strive. Because you are the evidence, you are the arrival, you are the portal. And that's the truth most people miss because it sounds too simple. Because simplicity is terrifying to the mind that was trained in complexity, the mind that believes struggle equals worth, that effort equals value, that only what is earned through pain is truly deserved. But the quantum doesn't play by those rules, the quantum responds to coherence, to clarity, to frequency, not effort, not strain, not sacrifice. It doesn't reward suffering, it reflects state. And when your state is one of love, of trust, of alignment, you unlock doors that action alone could never open. And that's why it feels so backwards to most people, because we've been taught to climb ladders, to follow steps, to push harder. But the quantum invites us to feel deeper, to listen closer, to align truer. It's an inside-out reality, not outside-in. And that shift in direction is the shift in power. Because when you stop chasing and start radiating, the whole game changes, you stop trying to prove your worth and start embodying your truth. And the world begins to organize itself around your signal, not because you manipulated it, but because you became magnetic. And that magnetism isn't about being perfect, it's about being present, it's about owning your frequency, even when no one claps, even when no one sees, even when the results haven't arrived yet. Because that's where your true power is, in the unseen, in the becoming, in the frequency you hold before it becomes form. And that's what most people miss, they give up before the field can respond, they question themselves when nothing moves, forgetting that the quantum field moves with consistency, not urgency, that it listens to the dominant vibration, not the fleeting thought. And that's why simplicity is hard to trust, because it requires patience, it requires presence, it requires faith, not blind faith but embodied faith, the kind that lives in your breath, in your posture, in your energy, the kind that says I am the frequency, I am the portal, I am the creator. And when you live from that space, your desires stop being destinations and start being reflections of who you've chosen to be. And in that space you no longer wonder if it's working, you feel that it is. Because the evidence is not out there, it's in here, it's in the way you wake up, it's in the way you speak, it's in the way you breathe. And that is the essence of quantum manifestation. It is not an outcome, it is a way of being. It is not a technique, it is a remembrance. And the more you remember, the less you need to chase, the less you need to perform, the less you need to try. And instead you live, you align, you become. And in that becoming, everything aligns, not all at once, but piece by piece, signal by signal, shift by shift. And that is how the new world forms, not through force but through frequency.